Welcome, Mary. Good evening, Michael. We're taking the principles that we've learned over the last two classes, and what we're doing tonight is we're applying them to a parent-child relationship. So, a good place to start. The charts we're looking at tonight, as you know from your first week's notes, are the charts of Jacques and Philippe Pierre Cousteau, father and son diving team. Any of you who are old enough to have lived through the 70s will have remembered the undersea world of Jacques Cousteau. Again, we might question the relevancy of these charts since they're both dead, of a parent and child. I like to use celebrities rather than to pull from my client base just because of privacy issues. And celebrities basically have their information out there in the world. Neither of these persons were ever my clients. I feel comfortable talking about them in class. So, again, one of the things I like to look at early on is just to get an overview of temperament. Temperament helps us determine compatibility and incompatibility. And in this case, we can see that with Jacques Cousteau, air, water, fire, earth are almost equivalent. Probably good that he didn't have a lot of fire. He could have been put out and all of that underwater activity. But the combination of earth and water is generally very compatible. Why? They're both feminine elements. Air and fire are masculine elements. Now, if we look over here, we can see that earth is dominant in Philippe's chart, followed by water. So what is weak here is fire and air. So, one of the generalities we can determine in this relationship is they both have water and earth prominent and can probably connect through those activities, through the emotion of water, through the practicality of earth. Let's look again at our first step. And with the father, Uranus is the most powerful planet in Jacques Cousteau's chart. Would anyone like to address that as far as his temperament's concerned? Yes, Uranus people tend to move very quickly. And where is Uranus in his chart? So, if we think of Uranus as being the individualistic urges of the soul, of being, as Laura has described, a revolutionary, he basically brought about the ecology revolution, which his descendants continue in that vein. If we think of Uranus, again, one of the best qualities associated with Uranus is inventiveness, originality. And the worst qualities can be through being abrupt or being eccentric. One might say that, Jacques Cousteau was a little eccentric. He spent much of his time underwater. And some might say, if God wanted us to live underwater, he would have given us gills. But Uranus, I do believe that Cousteau invented the aqualung. And much of what is it used now in modern diving were things he experimented with. So Uranus is strong, which is this originality, inventiveness, being unorthodox, being at the vanguard of trends. With a prominent ascendant, what might that tell us? Personality plus, but also somebody who is very physical. I like to describe the ascendant as being the soul's grounding water to the physical body. And persons who have a dominant ascendant need to live through their bodies. Therefore, they could be drawn to things such as diet, nutrition, exercise, movement, dance, anything in that capacity. The need for the person with the dominant ascendant is to experience life through their body. So that would have been prominent with Cousteau. And what about having a prominent Mars? 10th house of career. But if we look at it, Mars is not only strong, it's his greatest discord in this chart. I think somebody mentioned something a few moments ago about temper. And I would assign the temper that he had, not to Uranus, but to Mars. Except it's hard to separate them. Why is that? 25 Cancer to 24 Capricorn. If we were to look at the aspects, that opposition is really quite powerful, and it looks like the greatest discord in his chart. And it also looks like it is the singularly most powerful aspect. That is the single most powerful aspect and the singularly most discordant aspect in his chart. Now, perhaps he was able to antidote these aspects to his behavior and put this into mechanical engineering, combining the two elements here. Okay, Mars does sextile the ascendant, and Uranus trines the ascendant. So, what may have happened here, again, I would have to go back and probably read a couple of biographies. Keep in mind, in television programs, they usually cut out the stuff that makes you look like an ass, unless they are political ads. And then people do prize that information, and they use it against their opponent. So, Mercury becomes the conciliatory factor, as does the ascendant. We have Mercury sextiling Mars and forming a trine to Uranus. And then we also have the ascendant forming a sextile to Mars and a trine to Uranus. So both of these points become conciliatory factors, either using one's logic, reasoning, mental processes towards managing when Mars is conjunct, square, opposing Uranus, and lesser when it's involved in semi-squares or sesqui squares with Uranus, one can have a very abrupt, explosive temper, surprisingly so. And, chances are he had that. We just may not know about it. One could have the charm of Libra rising, or we know that Libra desires peacemaking, So there could be enough in this personality to decide to curb the reactionary qualities of this opposition in order to express a gracious personality. And there may have been explosive moments in trying to get those ideas apart. Sometimes, too, if you're brilliant and other people aren't, you can get frustrated when you're trying to get them to understand these concepts or ideas. Now, if we try to compare Astrodine's, his son Philippe is in many ways very different. The motivating factors for him are the moon. Now, the fact that it's in Aquarius, he doesn't have the natural genius qualities represented by his father with the dominant Uranus. But the moon in Aquarius would have made him sharp enough to be able to interact with and understand his father's ideas. Pluto, first house. Pluto's universal welfare. So what I imagine that Philippe really got was the benefit to the whole being the ecosystem, the global welfare. Another curiosity, look at this, Mars 26 Scorpio, Uranus 22 Taurus. What is something that both individuals share? And that through this opposition, though it's definitely rearranged in the house positions, that is something they have in common. Loose cannon, daredevil, devil may care. And then the midheaven's important here. And the person with the dominant midheaven, unlike the person with the dominant ascendant, the dominant ascendant is tied into physical self-expression. The person with the dominant midheaven is driven by their goals. They have to amount to something in this world. There's an incredible need to make their mark on the world, to be recognized for what they do, to go through life with a mission, with a career, or what we call a vocation, which means a calling. Right. The sign is less important than the power of the midheaven. The only thing that the sign will tell us, Laura, is the way in which that drive towards accomplishment may be colored, the environments where we may seek to express it. Here with Neptune, or with Pisces, what does Pisces go through? Right, or it could be the undersea world. Pisces can also be involved with film and television. Tends to be drawn towards performing arts. Yes, things of the imagination. So now let's drop down to the houses. What's important for Philippe Pierre? Friends. Friends, hopes, wishes, groups, clubs, organizations, social circles, societies. The first house, because of Pluto's position, because Pluto is so very prominent, and the moon, the planet governing the ascendant, is the most powerful planet in the chart, which is why the first house has so much strength. So again, even though he may not have a dominant ascendant, dominant first house, is geared towards physical prowess of some type. However, I always describe Pluto in the first house, or when Pluto conjuncts the ascendant, as somebody who is always physically pushing the envelope. These are people who may, try different diets to the extreme, things like fasting. These are persons who may, want to hold their yoga pose, the leg behind the head to see how long they can do it. They're always pushing things physically with themselves. At the same time, it can be someone who, in their athletics or whatever their area of physical skill might be, they may always be trying to best themselves, best their own personal record. Then the sixth house, which is where we have his conjunction of Mercury and the Sun in Capricorn. Philippe might also be service-minded, health-minded, very focused in on his job. Let's look at his papa. 10th house. Career, honor, reputation. 9th house of education. So we've got the Mars, Neptune in the 10th, Mercury, Sun, Pluto in the 9th, and in the first house, Jupiter, right on the ascendant. So, some similarities here. They both have dominant first house. Where will this father-son relationship find their common ground?
Physical activities?
Thank you, Holly. Through sport or physical activities, or through health-related interest, through athleticism of some kind. Now let's look at factors involving temperament, the signs. Cancer is dominant with Jean, followed by Libra and Taurus. Now, we also noticed when we looked at the summary for his chart that water, air, and earth were dominant. So, here is somebody who is emotional. Keyword for Cancer, I feel. Somebody who is mental, social, and negotiating, Libra, I balance. And Taurus, somebody who might be acquisitive and practical, I have. Let's do, okay, here we have Taurus, earth, Aquarius, air, and Leo, fire. Taurus, I have. We can assume that there's going to be connecting points between their charts through the Taurus energy. And to some degree, the Custos did build a little dynasty. Aquarius, the realm of ideas, we know the Taurus will be compatible with his father's Taurus. The Aquarius is compatible with his father's Libra. And the Leo is sort of the surprise factor here. And we know that primarily the strength comes from the fact that Pluto is there in the first house. What about prominent Leo? I always like to describe it as, ta-da! Yes. So there can be a need, to grandstand, to capture the limelight, to be center stage, to be entertaining, to be gracious, to be mannered. That is something that's very important to Leos, is they want people to follow the rules, and they would actually prefer that you follow the rules without having to be told. Damn it. I would imagine, though I think it was probably friendly competition, but again, quite often children won't, even though the whole ancient guild system was dependent upon children learning from parents, and your career in medieval and Renaissance times was primarily dictated by what your parent did. In the era of choice, even though the inclinations might be there, quite often a child might choose to go down a different area. But in this case, he was brought up in the water, and no doubt he was having fun, and the affinity was there, and he was able to find ways to be different from his father.
And that Neptune conciliates that Mars-Uranus opposition that they both share in common. And it's in the house of the father. So do you think his father's idealism probably, or maybe practical idealism, inspired him?
I do. I think he got the ecology enthusiasm from his father, and it became a way of life.
It's kind of like the dynasty that Jacques may have built with the Neptune and his house, he's inheriting.
From he's inheriting his father's interest, passion, or environment. So, by looking at astrodynes, we can see the areas where these two might connect and get along. Now we want to look. He died by drowning. He was testing a seaplane on the Tagus River in Portugal, and it flipped. One of the passengers survived, but Philippe did not, at age 38. So, death is governed by what house? Fourth and eighth. Watery grave. Death, Aquarius. Uranus, opposed by Mars. A sudden, accidental death. Curiously, though, his father lived to a ripe old age. Saturn, the eighth house. I believe he died from things related to being old. And when Venus falls in your eighth house, generally it's a happy day. If you're able to know what's going on when it happens. So let's look now at our handouts. We've gone through the charts here. We've got the whole chart up. Inner wheel, Jacques. Outer wheel, Pierre. So by placing one person's planets in the outer wheel of another, we can see where we influence them. And in this case, it could be good to do a delineation by just going around the wheel. First planet we see is Pierre Philippe's Mars falls in Jacques' second house. What might that tell us? Expensive. Yes. Could be true. We certainly know he helped them in business, though usually the interpretation of Mars in the second is spendthrift. Mars tends to be a drain financially. It is a passionate spender. So we now have to wonder who bought the sequel. The third house of mental pursuits and just one's thoughts and communications. We've got Venus and Mercury in the third house. What type of relationship might this be?
The ability to have some kind communication and maybe needed to meet on a mental level and converse.
Conversation and caring. I would imagine that Pierre Philippe, if he even went to school and wasn't homeschooled on Calypso, thank you. He might have been the kid that would come home and want to, educate his father. Share information. Venus in the third house also means you can have pleasure while having short journeys together. Okay, fourth house. Pierre Philippe's sun and moon fall in Jacques' fourth house. Again, this can represent a family relationship. We might wonder sometimes who was fathering whom with his son in the fourth house. Or even unconventional lifestyle, living on boats and planes and all of that. But there's definitely a family bond here. And the fourth house can also be actually the physical home itself. The need to create home for family. Pierre's, or Philippe Pierre's midheaven is in his father's sixth house. So Philippe's goals, his life mission, serves his father's work. Now, having Jupiter's and Saturn, the business planets, and Uranus all in the eighth house of joint resources. In this case, we know that Philippe did not live to inherit from his father, but his father may have been impacted by some of Philippe's legacy. But Philippe went on to, as a teen and young adult, he went on to film school to study television and primarily became the producer on the Undersea World of Jacques Cousteau. And the eighth house is the producer's house because the producer is pulling in the resources. They are compiling not only the financial resources, but the producer also has to pull in the other filming resources, such as cameramen, makeup artists, costumers, which I didn't see any costumes on that show. They were purely the ones they put on and took off. There were bikinis and wetsuits. 10th house of career. Philippe's ascendant and Pluto fall in his father's 10th house. So here we're seeing an overlap relationship. And here we're seeing a parent and child who not only share a familial relationship, but also a professional relationship. With his ascendant in Pluto in the 10th house of his father's chart, I would say that Philippe was very active and avid about promoting his father's career. You can't get Pluto being mass destiny. He brought him to the television script and helped push him into international recognition. Neptune in his father's 12th house. Right, there could be a mystical, intuitive connection, a dream connection. His father might feel that, the son is doing Vulcan mind meld with him, just knowing things. Sometimes when you work with people, if you have this type of connection, you know when to do for them before they know to ask the question. Let's twist this around. All right. Papa's Mars falls in Sun's first house.
He probably challenged his son.
Probably challenged his son. What would the worst case scenario be? Yeah, corporal punishment. Best possibility would be pushing his son to find his athleticism, find his skill, to find his strength, to find his endurance, which we can see is something that Philippe would naturally want to do of his own. Moon in Leo of the father falls in the second house of the son. I imagine it was not hard for the father to be generous towards him. His kindness might have been expressed through things. Isn't the case of a father that got a relationship but didn't have an interaction because their lives were enmeshed with one another on so many levels. Again, home and family life stands out as being a real connection here, that they felt to be a family. With the father's ascendant and Jupiter in the 4th house, even though there is this Mars-Uranus opposition, he could be abrupt, short-tempered. I imagine the Jupiter conjuncting the Libra ascendant might have made for a very genial, generous, good-willed, even-tempered approach within the home. Uranus in the 7th house of relationships, partnerships, companionships. I don't know if the father, I do believe that Philippe was married and had children when he died. I don't know to what degree the father had an impact on his relationships. But that is his father's dominant planet. So there's a very good chance that Philippe's concerns might be, will my spouse be accepted as part of the family? Again, the dominant Uranus, if Philippe's partner was not, a mental match, then there could have been, frustrations there. Sometimes people who are very highly technological or very scientific, or they function within a high level of skill in a particular area, expect everyone else to get in the same way they do. And they can become very abrupt or easily frustrated at times. because they want you to intuitively know what they know without having to use their words and walk you through the logical steps. Saturn falls in the 10th house. And I would say that there's a very good chance that Jacques wanted to carefully steward his son's career. However, Saturn in the 10th house could have an inhibiting factor on one's career. In this case, I imagine that the son felt he could not move out from underneath the umbrella of his father's career. And therefore, whatever advances he made were in many ways done in promoting the father. It was a family business, and the father was the boss. Venus in the 11th house. I would also imagine as an adult that Philippe thought of his father as a friend, that they would have socialized and or partied together, drank a glass of wine after work. And this is quite interesting. The sun, Pluto, midheaven, Neptune of the father all fall in the sun's 12th house of restrictions and secret sorrows. What I imagine is, as much as they did for one another's careers, it is quite possible that Philippe felt that he could never quite get out of his father's, it may have been the underwater prison of Jacques Cousteau. He may have felt like he was in the shark cage. Well, they divorced, so we know there were some disappointments there. Considering the fact that he married a much younger woman the next year, I would not have been surprised if there was actually a relationship going on during that time. And who knows, the son may even have felt that he had to keep his father's secrets.
Yeah. Complex.
Right. If you're working together and doing everything together, and your mom's back in Paris, and you're watching your father hook up with someone else, there's going to be mixed emotions over that. Here, what do we see a predominance of? Planets at 2 degrees and 3 degrees. So for Jacques, Saturn, 2 Taurus, midheaven, 2 Cancer, ascendant, 2 Libra. Philippe, Moon, 2 Aquarius, Mercury, 2 Capricorn, Pluto, 3 Leo. So there's definitely interactions going on here. One thing we know that Mercury and the midheaven are in opposition. So let's go up. Philippe's Mercury at 2 Capricorn opposes his father's midheaven. What happens with oppositions? There are separations, and here it could be separations over ideas, self-expression, and professional goals. It's possible that Philippe had a lot of ideas that he may have tried to engage in, especially after going to school and coming back, and having, his father may have had a specialty in deep sea diving and ecology. Philippe brings his education of filmmaking. So there's one aspect. Here we have the midheaven in the 12th house, opposing Mercury in the 6th. This would be his ideas around his work and his employment. And I'll bet they went around the room quite a few times, quite often, on what their differences of ideas may have been around what should be shown, what should be promoted, how should the career be emphasized, and what his ideas or skill base were. Now, Saturn in Taurus is going to, Saturn square the moon. I'm thinking more and more he may have wanted to have a say in terms of who his son married. We may not have this information. The other thing, when Saturn impacts somebody else's moon, what do you think happens to the moon person? Shut down. The Saturn person becomes the wet blanket for the moon person. The moon Libra is very even-handed and very fair. There's really so much connecting just in these degrees of the chart. And it helps us understand why this is sort of a very known or a very recognizable parent-child relationship. They were connected. Now, Venus is at 8 degrees Taurus. Let's move up one. In Jacques' chart, Venus is 8 degrees in Taurus. Philippe's Saturn is 7 degrees. Conjunctions are very important between charts. They are points of soul contact. On this level, no doubt, the loss was felt so deeply, and or feelings of connectedness after death. If a scientist could even, give in to those thoughts or feelings. But I do find when Venus and Saturn are conjunct between charts, there is a long-term abiding love. One doesn't really question so much if the other person loves them or not. You know the person's in there for the long haul. There is this incredible bond between them. Now the Saturn also, there is the Sun, 8 degrees Capricorn, is also trine Venus. And that's another powerful love bond. So which could go two ways. Either the Sun could bring resources to the father and vice versa. These trines are mutually beneficial alliances. When we look at the other chart, the Venus-Saturn conjunction is in Philippe's 11th house of friendships. So again, we spoke of the father as also being able to cut loose and be a friend, confidant, social, someone who might want to be able to move within his son's obviously important social circles. And Venus from the house of friends, trining his son's son in the 6th house of work. The father gave him employment. He got to work on a television show that impacted millions. Now, another wonderful aspect. Let's look here. A Moon-Venus trine. Here, Venus is in his third house of mental pursuits to the house of socializing and friendships. Again, Venus moon trine are what astrologers hope for in their romantic relationships because of the loving, caring exchange that brings about. Father's Venus trines his sun, and the sun's Venus trines his father's moon. Nevertheless, one might suspect they adored one another. Despite the fact that the sun may have felt hemmed in somehow or standing in the shadows, for him it would have been a worthy cause. Okay, what about Philippe has an 18-degree Cancer ascendant. Jacques has a 17-degree Neptune, Cancer Neptune. That, again, this is another conjunction. It's a point of soul contact. And these two, especially in the I feel sign of Cancer, would have been intuitively linked with one another. His belief, the father's spirituality was the belief that humans had a responsibility to care for the earth. Would have strongly impacted the sun. But I also imagine, even though Philippe was the second born of the sons, and one would imagine from the time the father picked up this baby that there was a bond or a connection. Idealization, yes, and vice versa, idealizing the father. Now, something else is happening here. The ascendant, 18 Cancer, father's sun, 19 Gemini. This would make, to some degree, part of the boy's focus could be to enhance his father's ego, self-esteem, opportunities. If you look at the position here, the boy made every effort to enhance his father's public image, his promotion, his advertising, his public relations, his ability to teach on a larger scale by getting his instructional material out through television. It's a mild aspect, it's one sign apart, but it is harmonious. It's a semi-sextile or a growth aspect. I'm sure the father was a sometimes gentle, sometimes stern educator that pushed his son towards growth, and the son would have put his personal interest behind promoting his father. And there's more. Between 26 and 27 degrees, we have Pluto at 26 Gemini, and Mars at 26 Scorpio. That is an inconjunct. They're 5 signs apart. Pluto, universal welfare urges. Mars, the aggressive urges. The universal welfare drives of the father. The father's Pluto, 26 Gemini, to the son's Mars, 26 Scorpio. The father supported the son in his creative or entertainment endeavors. I would not be surprised if after the untimely death of his son, if the father affection with grandchildren. At the bottom here, it shows inner wheel Philippe, outer wheel Jacques,
Oh.
and then up here, inner wheel
Yeah.
Jacques, outer wheel Pierre. Actually, it's Philippe Pierre. The 12th house, definitely. I think he was groomed, Alice Marie, primarily because the father's lifestyle may have meant, since his sons were children, that they were just always together. And it's hard to imagine what kid, unless they were, hydrophobic, would not have loved growing up on a boat and scuba diving or doing all of that, where daily life could be the highest form of play. So yes, it may have been subtle, it may have been coercive, there may have been some grooming going on. But I don't think that the son was forced into something, where he really would have been an equestrian
No,
rather than a diver. I get the sense that even though this is the second child from birth, there was sort of just a comfortable, natural affinity, and with these conjunctions, they bonded. And with the Venus trines, they drew such joy or affection from one another's
It
company.
would have been so strong that it might have alienated the first son.
True. That could be very, because in families, as hard as parents try to avoid favoritism, one of the things we can see between parents and children is there can be rapport, and there may not be rapport with another child. And we tend to want to spend more time with that person who's around us, that's easy to be with, that likes the stuff that we like. Yeah. So here are the last aspects of the 27 degrees. We talk about Mars, Pluto, Neptune is squaring Pluto, and so is the midheaven. So Papa's Pluto in conjunctions Mars, but squares Philippe's Neptune and midheaven. Let's find that. Philippe, Neptune, 27 Virgo, midheaven, 27 Pisces. So, perhaps he did go into a career that was his father's influence or choosing. And with Pluto squaring both of those, yes. What about the era in which they lived? Was it an era where it was unusual to have authoritarian fathers? No. Nowadays we might question these things and be concerned about the psychological impact. But back in the 40s they weren't really doing that. Maybe a few of Freud's friends were, for the most part. That wasn't in the general discussion. So, and also going back, there is a very good chance that that Philippe didn't see what happened with his parents' relationship because he died in 78. I believe that Jacques remarried in 91. Yeah. Right. So he was 81 then.
When he fathered
Yeah.
that
And
handsome young,
two more children. Right.
what was his name?
Pierre.
Pierre.
Right. So, let's see if we can find a biography. This is Wikipedia, which is is a great place to get bios. It also is linked to the Astro Databank.
Do you want Philippe's MC?
Yes, please.
27 Pisces.
Right, with Neptune exactly opposite it in 27 Virgo. And then his father's Pluto, forming a square to both. French oceanographer and cinematographer, the younger son and chief protege of his famous dad, Jacques Cousteau, working as a diver and photographer. He married Janice Sullivan. Look at that, he didn't marry a French girl. That, without that influence in the seventh house, that could have been a disappointment. Died, but it says here, linked to Wikipedia biography. So this is a great way for you to do research. You can find charts and then link to a biography, and we can see the answer to you, Laura. Yes, he had 2 children, Alexandra and Philippe Jr.
Oh, so she was, okay, this is the late marriage? No, Philippe.
Philippe,
Okay, so it's always for the daughter, okay.
yes. Now,
It showed June 28th, which is almost St. John's Day.
oh, there it is. Thank you. June 28th. Yes, the time where we step into the water.
Wow.
Okay, so let's go here and progress the chart. Progress chart. We said that Jacques had a predominance of planets distributed evenly between Earth, air, and water, and a shortage in fire, and that Philippe had a predominance of water and earth. So they share the negative or the feminine elements in common. So we're progressing the chart. If I'm looking for death, I might look to the ascendant, the 8th house, the rulers of the 1st house and the 8th house primarily. And I find nothing there that I pull in the 4th house. So we might progress the chart, let's say, because it doesn't rule his 8th house or his 1st house. Saturn and Uranus are the rulers. I'm only bringing Mars in since he
Oh,
died.
and you've got Jupiter up there too.
Christopher?
Yes.
And the moon's at 2 something. The natal moon in the 7th house. So were those exact, or were they a few minutes away?
Well, in the natal chart, they are opposed, and it's 252 to 204, so they are by progression exact, and that shows up here. I don't know if you're able to see the screen, Holly, but I put the progressions up, so we can see that Pluto. So the aspects in orb that were affecting life or death are life being the 1st house, death being the 8th house. Saturn was trying the Sun during that period of time. Natal Saturn, co-ruler of the 8th, was conjunct natal position. Uranus also did not move. This isn't unusual for progressions to Saturn normally would have moved away, but because it was retrograde at birth and went direct thereafter and passed over the natal position. Pluto, these are all slow-moving outer planets, so they're not giving us a lot of information. We've run out of time, but on your own, you having the birth data, you could go back and look for. So, what I might do in this case, if I'm not, these are all just aspects that really haven't changed since the time of birth, so it doesn't give us a lot of information. pairs-up. Look at all of the progressions involving the first and eighth house at that time.
You didn't even look at the square, did you?
So hopefully you're all learning about relationships here.
Great.
And this is a really good example of why, as much as you may want to be a fair parent, sometimes you end up liking one kid more than the other. And vice versa.
And I was gonna say vice versa.
Right. Sometimes one child will like one parent more than the other.
Or be willing to take the,
So, all right, we have 2 more classes. Next week we're looking at friendship, and then on the final week we're looking at collegial relationships. So see you all later.
by those.